Okay, I think we're recording. So this is episode 6 now. And this week, our intent is to talk about the beauty standards of China. And it's interesting, actually, because there's been some interesting news come out this week regarding cosmetic companies. Unilever, L'Oreal, and I think Nivea as well. They've now announced this week that they will be changing the wording on some of their products and maybe banning the products entirely, which basically include things like skin whitener and stuff to do with skin tone. Now, I think most people don't realize just how big a market it is in East Asia. And this is Thailand, Japan, Korea massively so, and China being the biggest market. When it comes to girls and men using skin cream, most of the moisturizers in it have a whitening lotion, and it's actually pretty hard to find a lotion without whitener in it. As you may tell, I try and take care of my appearance. Not really, but I had to actually get skin cream without whitener in it for my face off Taobao. It took quite a long time. Boys, did you find this problem in China when you were buying like skin products? If you buy skin products,
Trevor?
Well, I don't dabble in moisturizer very much. However, I can tell you that a lot of just over-the-counter soaps, the bath soap that you would use, or shower soap, shower gels, often have whitening aspects marketed with them. Which would steer clear, and I found that strange. That usually in the U.S. and other places where I've been shopping, you won't find soaps that advertise whitening ability, like a bar of soap. Occasionally, but not nearly as prevalent as in China. How about you, Lewis? Is this something that you've come across?
Yeah, I mean, this was something to be honest, I was completely ignorant about. And I think I'd been in China for a couple of weeks, and I'd seen it in shops, like this whitening. Like I actually see it like in English, like it says whitening. And I said to a friend who had been there for a year before me, and I said, like, oh, is that like for their teeth? Like, because it looks like I thought it was like a really big, funny shaped toothpaste or something. I actually said, like, oh, is it for the teeth? And they're like, no, it's for the skin. And I was like, really? That was my sort of introduction to, like, obviously whitening. And like, I guess it's sort of the opposite to what I'm used to in Britain, where everybody wants a suntan. People get fake tan, and they get the, girls put more makeup on their face to make their skin look more tanned. And then in Asia, it sort of really surprised me that they're doing the opposite.
Yeah. So just to give some full context here, it's a big talking point in the West at the moment. It's in all the newspapers. Unilever have come out first. Now, it's unclear whether they're going to actually ban the product or if they're going to change the wording. Because what you've said, on a lot of this product, it has the local language, whether it be Thai or whether it be Chinese, alongside the English language as well, which would say whitener or including whitener. And I first came across this in Thailand when I first went to Thailand, because I didn't take like enough toiletries, and I was in a local shop, and everything I was picking up just kept saying whitener in it. And I actually ended up using it, but it was very noticeable on my skin. And I thought, well, I want to get a suntan. I'm out on holiday. I don't particularly want to use this. And it slowly dawned on me. And after speaking to local people, it was a massive industry. I mean, you can't underestimate. It's a multi-billion-pound industry out there. Certainly, not only for the women, but also for the men. Like, you're in the gym, and in China, a lot of the guys in the gym, they all have their lotions out, and they're all whitening lotions as well. So, for the company like Unilever, L'Oreal, I'm not sure really what game they're playing at, because they certainly wouldn't turn their nose up at this market. And if they're going to try and push either to terminate the product or to withdraw it from market. I just can't see that, because it's this isn't a little slice of money. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry out there. So my suspicions is that the products will remain in place, but it's just going to remove the English language from it, because I think what's going on, a lot of the pushback with woke culture, a lot of it's about the semantics of the English language more than anything. Lewis, when you were looking at some of these products, and I think the other one that's come up in the news is the toothpastes as well in China. Is there some discrepancy? Have you ever noticed when you look at the Chinese wording and the English wording on some of these products?
I'm sort of not sure what to say about that, John. I think you assume I buy a lot more of these beauty products than I really do. I mean, I'm not sure if it shows, but I think like you see the reference to whitening, white on the skin products, the same way that you'd see reference to white on toothpaste in Britain with whitening effect. One that did surprise me was when I bought some suntan lotion that had like whitener in it that I didn't realize at the time. That was a few years ago. And I just thought that was interesting, because it's like, for me, I'm buying suntan lotion because I don't want to get burnt. I'm buying sunblock because I want to get burnt. But I think for a lot of Chinese people, their concern isn't necessarily getting burnt, but it's not getting tanned.
So, yeah, I mean, look, and all this is going to come down to, shall we say, perceptions of beauty in China, whether it's male or female, what they see as the optimum form of beauty. Now, Trevor, how do you think you've had and you're married and you've had experience with Chinese women? How conscious of their appearance? Is it? Do you think Chinese girls can be quite high maintenance in terms of their beauty standards? Is it always a conscious thing that's going on?
Yeah, it's tough to make generalizations because there's always exceptions, but the exception does prove the rule. And I would say that it's not just limited towards Chinese women. Any foreigner that will be in China for some time and understands a lot of the content will definitely drastically notice the difference of how much physical appearance is commented upon. And it's not just being say a foreigner or non-Chinese looking person, non-Han Chinese looking person, but rather everyone is constantly commenting on each other, not constantly, but quite frequently commenting on how each other's looks, and not clothes or decisions you make, but the size of your ears, the size of your eyes, the size of your nose and mouth, and different ratios, as well as body and beyond. It's quite overwhelming, and it would take you as being incredibly superficial at times, but it's not always judgmental in the same sense, John, kind of like what you're saying. In the sense of like whitening, like there's that, and Lewis, you would probably know this, Bai Fu Mei is the standard for beautiful women, which is white-skinned, wealthy, and beautiful. And for men, it's Gao Fu Shuai, which is tall, wealthy, and handsome. So obviously wealth is important here too, but they're being tall and being as a man and being white as a woman are associated with being well off, definitely.
These are the kind of people that you will see in the media,
right?
And it's especially what we call red internet. I forget the Chinese. Wang Hong, is it red internet? The girls that make it. Yeah. The girls that make a living in the. What's the Chinese, Trevor? I think it just translates as red internet, right?
Yeah, Wang Hong. It's like internet celebrities or often live streamers.
That's the like influencer or something like that.
Yeah. And they can do they can make a lot of money, you know. It's a big industry out there. But you know, these beauty standards, it goes through to newsreaders, to people in soaps. You don't see much prevalence, shall we say. There's not like this in the West. We have this now inclusive. We have to have this plethora of people of different sizes, gender and race and so forth. But in China and in East Asia, there's still this one ideal that they kind of focus on. We can maybe talk a little bit about why, or maybe reasons why we think this is the case. But yeah, just before we go there, what you're saying about the comments as well, it's not unusual for someone to comment that you're fat, especially like one of the elder generation, an IE, to tell you directly, you know, that someone's fat, or that
Who called you fat, John?
Not just the older generation, John. You know, people in their 20s just like, oh, can you parla?
Yeah. I had a couple of students when I did put on weight that just came straight out and just said,
and
fat.
Yeah, like it's I think, you know, and the thing is, like, particularly with like the word fat, particularly, I don't know whether they're saying that to you in English, because I feel like in Chinese when they say fat as well, it doesn't necessarily have the exact same connotations as the word fat does in English. Like, they might just mean that you're big. Like, I've known, like, I mean, guys who have like clearly going to the gym who are quite big, but also they're not carrying a lot of body fat on them. They're fairly lean, muscular guys, but the Chinese will still call them fat. They'll say plump.
That's
like,
right.
So it's a comment on your size rather than your. But then, yeah, like, also being large and muscular in China isn't necessarily the desired beauty standard anyway. So it could still be negative when they're using it that way, I guess.
That's true. Yeah, they don't seem to idolize muscle so much. I think it's definitely changing, and you see that with the success of gyms, and you see more kind of guys in the media that are more ripped and butch and so forth. But
a lot of the adverts I see in the gyms, John, it's still, a lot of them are advertising, you know, slimming down courses and things, and get thinner. I don't see so much like bulking up. I mean, there are guys in the gym who I've seen who are big and they're obviously trying to bulk up, and I've spoken to guys who are trying to bulk up, but I think that's sort of a kind of a niche thing. It's still very minority. Whereas in Britain, and I guess America as well, the majority of guys who are going to the gym are not trying to be thin. They're trying to look more muscular.
Yeah, get jacked up. But I mean, you went to my gym, right? It's one of the busiest. Well, I don't know if it is one of the busiest in Hangzhou. It's in a central place in the CBD. But I mean, there's like a cluster of guys there, 10 or 15 guys, the same guys every week. And, you know, it's not that busy. Most of the people in there are doing kind of high cardio. They're doing boxercise classes and stuff like that, men and women, to, you know, keep this slim frame. So I think like there is like not too much of a distinction between muscle and fat, and whether, you know, muscle is like this ideal beauty standard for a male. How about Lewis? What do you think? What about the girls in the gym? I think some of them are starting to work out a bit more, right, from the.
I mean, not just from talking about the girls in the gym and what they seem to be aspiring to, but also talking to like male Chinese friends that I've got, and what they find attractive in females. I don't think is necessarily the same as what most guys in the West would be looking for. You know, they're not necessarily looking for that sort of figure of 8 shape. They're not looking for curves, and they're looking for thin and beautiful face. I think there's so much more emphasis in Asia, certainly in China, on the face, big eyes, you know, sort of thin face. That's another thing as well. It's actually, they've got a big thing about their cheeks and their face being round. They want like a thin face, and their body being thin. There's not, I think, you know, the most common plastic surgery probably in the world is, in fact, I'd put money on it, is the eyelid surgery to make their eyes look bigger. But I think in Britain, in America, there's probably not many people having plastic surgery on their eyes. I think the number one plastic surgery procedures would be other things. So there's definitely a distinction between the beauty standards. But yeah, in the gyms, and you know, I've seen girls in the gym who are clearly trying to put on weight. They're trying to get a big bum, they're doing squats, they're doing deadlifts. But again, as I say, it seems to be a bit of a niche thing and a minority. The majority are this, they want a pretty face and as thin a body as possible. I've seen stick thin girls who are still talking about how they want to lose weight.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not like that doesn't happen in other countries in the West as well. But I think it's much more common in China.
There was that challenge. I think last year it went viral where the challenge was for a girl to be able to fit a number of coins like inside her collarbone. So it was kind of girls that were super thin. They developed this natural kind of indentation in their collarbone, and it became like a viral challenge. That how many you could fit in was like a sign of beauty. But I mean, to me, it seems like undernourished and too fragile, and I don't really find it attractive. I can see that they're pretty, but for me, it crosses over the line into unattractiveness. Trevor, do you think that your taste in women or your perceptions of what is beauty changed when you went to China after a bit?
Well, I mean, maybe not in the senses that they conformed with mainstream Chinese views of beauty, but definitely, I mean, this goes back to what I was saying before. If people are commenting it on all the time, like before I went to China, no one, I mean, maybe my grandma or aunt or mom would say, "Oh, you're so handsome." Like, it's not a word that peers and or use a lot in the US, but people would say it so casually in China to the point where you end up start to feel like you are more handsome.
It's true.
Even though it's a
strokes the ego.
Hollow, it goes to your ego. Even if you are aware how hollow and not really true, it's just oh, your eyes are so beautiful, or your nose is so tall, like things like this that it's not a compliment, but you just understand that in the community you have attractive features that actually you don't find attractive yourself, and it gets to your ego. You can't not recognize that.
I think newcomers have to be a bit careful because you're right. It's very common for people just to say that you're handsome. I mean, men will say, the first time I got my hair cut when I was learning Chinese, I could understand I was handsome. And I was thinking, well, that's a bit strange, for a man to tell another man that he's handsome. Because in the UK or in the West, we'd see that as a bit of a lead on, you know what I mean? Saying, oh, right, she's getting fresh or she's interested.
But it's not just men, it's everyone. People are just, a lot of the Chinese people comment on your attractive features quite frequently. And it's not limited to foreigners either.
I think the thing is, it's very perfunctory in China when they do it. It's like, when they say you're handsome, it doesn't actually mean they really find you attractive. It's like, it's almost like a greeting, like, oh, how's nice weather today, isn't it? Oh, you're handsome. It's almost like a, very perfunctory thing. And I think a lot of, people when they first go to China and they don't realize that, and then it kind of like, it can, sort of, inflate your ego quite a bit. And you start to think like, oh yeah, I'm really super good looking, and then actually like it's really not like that. It's actually, they say that to everyone. It's a very perfunctory thing. It's almost like it's a polite thing to say.
Right. There's a way to compliment someone's attractiveness in China, not just foreigners, Chinese as well, and you hear it quite frequently. Like, oh, you've got great hair, or your clothes, or oh, your eyes, or your ears, or something, some kind of attribute.
So should we try and unearth some of this then, or kind of look at where it comes from? So let's go back. Let's look at the beauty standards of women, and that most Chinese women, they will quite happily use a moisturizer containing whitener. Now, do you think that comes from a lot of pressure from the beauty standards, from like peer pressure from the media, Or do you think it's a bit more deep-rooted than that? Have you ever thought about it? I mean, do you think it's a particularly a problem, or it's just something we should just let them get on with?
I think the skin whitening thing, and I've heard Chinese people saying this as well. It's the peasants, as they call it, basically people who are not from the cities, have dark skin. And the reason why they have the dark skin is because they tan easily, they're outside, particularly if it's people who have been working manual labor jobs like builders or, farm workers and stuff. They're going to be more tan because they're outside. And, Asians definitely tan more easily than I do, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is actually, it's almost like social class discrimination.
Yeah.
Where it's like they can kind of like distinguish themselves from the lower class, the people who are perceived as being less educated, working low-paid manual labor jobs, because they've got their white skin and their pale, their pale skin, and it sort of distinguishes them from the what they would call peasants, Nomin, who a lot of them like kind of migrant workers who have come to the cities. So I think there's a bit of that, but I think also some of it is also they associate tan skin as being sun damaged skin as well, and I think maybe there's that sort of association of if you're out in the sun and you're getting tan skin because you're out in the sun all day, then after 5-10 years, then your skin starts to get very sun damaged. I mean, I think you mentioned that about people in Thailand, John, who obviously been out in the sun. They've been there, like a lot of expats who've been there a long time, and then you can see that their skin's very sun damaged.
Oh yeah, and you've got this with, I mean, obviously with Australians with skin cancer, they have a huge rate of skin cancer because obviously Europeans only living in Australia for 200 years. But with the farming and the what we say, the social class regarding skin tone, I think that's at the root of it. It's really about labouring, having to toil outside for thousands of years as a farmer. If you toil outside, there's a natural darkness of pigmentation to the skin that happens. Whereas those in more bureaucratic jobs that held the power, they would shade and be sheltered from the sun, and they would gain a fairer complexion. So it's seen as a social status that you can have a higher job, that you're not exposed to these quite harsh conditions. Because let's not forget, in Europe, our summers are quite mild compared to other parts of the world. The sun is a bloody dangerous thing. In Hangzhou at 40 degrees in the summer, you don't want to be out in that fucking thing. It's pretty brutal. And if you're a farmer throughout the summer, this is a harsh job. And your statement parading fair white skin is to say, this represents my social class. And this goes through not only with skin whitener, but also the umbrella. Like the umbrella is the most used thing in China because it's used for the rain and the sun. And, pretty much every girl will take an umbrella out on a sunny day. And I actually started to use an umbrella as well in the sun, which I thought I never would. Have you guys used one? Trevor, do you?
It is helpful. It is helpful when it's that hot.
Oh yeah, definitely. It stops you sweating through your shirt. And yeah, I tried toughing it out for the first couple of years. I thought, I'm not going to use an umbrella, mad dogs and Englishmen in the midday sun kind of thing. But towards the end, I was like, I'm just going to use an umbrella when it's when the sun's shining because it's just brutal. But Trevor, have you got anything to add to that with the?
John, you've changed. He's an umbrella man now.
Yeah,
it's on record. We've got it on record.
No, I'll wear a hat or sunglasses and put on sunscreen if it's particularly a bright day. But I don't bring an umbrella out. That didn't change about me. But you're both of you are right on the money. I think when this goes back to when we're talking about socioeconomic and attractiveness, and how you've got Gao Fu Shuai and Bai Fu Mei, right? That being white and tall, or whiter and taller, are associated with an upper class, and not being a peasant and working the fields, where you're shorter and darker, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much a clear distinction. But
it can play out. So I'm just, and then Lewis might be aware of this as well. So, and it's for the company that me and Lewis worked for when I first got to China for Webby. So they would have CCs, which are called course consultants, which should try and get potential customers in, usually adults, students, to learn English. Now, it's quite expensive. People don't realize that actually taking an English course in China is pretty much for the wealthy. You know, it's a few £1,000s or a few $1,000s for a course. So it's definitely not for everyone. Now, I knew some of these CCs quite well. One in particular, because we dated for a long time and we lived together actually. And she told me basically that the CCs wouldn't even try and sell to someone with a darker complexion, because there was this automatic assumption that they were poor, that they had no money. So they would just save themselves time of going through the whole sales spiel of like 1 hour sitting down, you know, showing them videos. They would just do like a fast track, because they had to meet a target of trying to sell. So sometimes they would just get any people off the street and then just go, do you want to buy this? No, you don't. Okay, bye-bye. And tick it off as one of the sales. So, I started to realize it's quite ingrained in the perceptions of people, really ingrained, like how someone maybe with a darker complexion is still associated with lack of money, lack of resources, the inability to be paid. Maybe they won't be treated so well in shops because they presume that they won't have the money. I think the men are pushing back against it recently. I've got quite a few Chinese male friends that are good businessmen now. They're quite successful, and they don't really care about their skin tone anymore. So I think it's probably changing a bit. But do you think these perceptions are pretty much ingrained? Lewis, what do you think?
I think you're right. I mean, it could go the other way then. It could eventually get to the point where it's like, well, if you're rich enough to be going on holiday to, Europe or America, and you're outside and you're getting suntan, then we could then see it go the other way, which I think that's what's happened in the West as well. I think, if you look back at, Queen Elizabeth I, and her face is painted white, right? I think that was like, it was like a similar thing back then, where the association of pale skin with not having to work in the fields. But then I think, more recently, I don't know about you guys, but when I was at school, it's like, if a kid comes back after the summer holiday and he's got a tan, it's like, oh, wow, where have you been on holiday? Oh, you could afford to go to Spain. It's almost like a badge of honor. Like, I mean, when I was a kid, we could never afford to go on holiday abroad to places warm enough to sit on the beach and get a tan. So I think, maybe it could go that way in China. But I think, as you mentioned, with the sort of like that kind of discrimination in China against people, particularly, it tends to be rural migrant workers or people from poor areas of China. It's not just appearance that comes into it. There's a lot of other factors as well. Another big one being like language, and they're sort of like whether they're speaking dialect and how they're speaking Mandarin. So I think it's not. I don't think it's necessarily all about appearance and sort of, and that I think there's a lot of other factors.
Yeah, I agree. I think one more thing that's quite interesting, and Trevor, now that you're back in the States, you may have noticed this. I haven't noticed it so much in England now because everyone's been on lockdown and I haven't been socializing. And actually, where I'm living now in the UK, there's not so much of a Chinese diaspora that lives here. But I remember I'd been in China for a year, then I went to Australia for a bit, and there's quite a few ethnic Chinese that live in Australia, Australian citizens, and many Chinese who go there on holiday or visiting as a student. And it became abundantly clear to me that it was very easy to tell the difference between who was an Australian citizen and who was not, just by looking at them, by observing them, from the clothes that they wear, even kind of the way that they walked. Because the Australian Chinese girls, they'd have more skin exposed. They wouldn't be using an umbrella. I could still hear that they were speaking Chinese to each other, but it was kind of very different. Their attitude was also very different, and they were kind of bouncing around, and it wasn't a language thing at all. I'm not talking about their level of English. It was just like these perceptions. And the Chinese girls would be who were mainland Chinese just visiting there would be a lot more covered up, a lot more dainty, shall we say. Have you noticed anything like that, Trevor, in the States?
I've only been back in the States for 6 months now, so I can't generalize. But something I can tell you, and anyone who's been to the beach in mainland China or been to a beach with a lot of mainland Chinese people can give you a testament. Like when I went to Sanya or Hainan, which is the Hawaii of China, quote unquote. It is interesting to go to the beach and see people with more covered clothing, especially women, than if you go to this shopping mall in Shanghai or Hangzhou in the summer months. It was around the same time that people, when you're out in the sun, there's just this definite kind of fear that you're going to get your skin darker. Your skin's going to become darker.
Yeah.
So I think this kind of feeds into what you're saying, is that it's quite obvious to notice a group of mainland Chinese people in the summertime, particularly by the lack of revealing clothing. And definitely it goes without saying that revealing clothing is not so much of a taboo in mainland China. But if it's going to be revealing in the sun and you're going to be exposed in the sun, then it's not a good thing because you risk your skin becoming darker.
Yeah. I want to talk about the revealing.
I have to respectfully disagree with you, Trevor. Revealing clothing, I think it is maybe not a taboo, but I think what is acceptable to reveal is not necessarily the same as in the West. Like I think revealing your legs up to as high as possible is acceptable, but I found that girls are very reluctant to reveal any cleavage.
Yeah, this is again, I think, a big difference, and I wanted to touch on this. Is when I first got to China, I noticed that in the schools, the girls were wearing extremely, because I mean it's hot, they were wearing very short skirts and shorts, which I think generally in the West we'd probably say was inappropriate. I'm not sure if the standards have changed now. I mean, look, I didn't take offense to it or anything, but I did raise an eyebrow, and it became clear that that exposing legs in the workplace for Chinese girls is very acceptable. It's not seen as risque or socially frowned upon. But anything about the top half, it's still very covered up. So it's kind of like the sacred, the place that if you reveal any kind of low neck or cleavage, that's kind of regarded as a bit, what's the word, should we say, slutty, or a bit kind of too much.
Talkative.
Yeah, but legs are absolutely fine. So it's very it's very common to see women and girls with extremely short skirts and with big, long, baggy jumpers or cardigans in the summer. You barely ever see exposed shoulders.
Or just the one big baggy T-shirt.
Yeah, that's true. Like,
but how about for guys? Because we're talking a lot about girls here, but I think the beauty standard, what's acceptable for guys to reveal is different as well. Like we can't talk about revealing skin without talking about the Beijing bikini, can we?
Oh yeah. So
illegal now.
Is it illegal?
Who's going to demonstrate the Beijing bikini?
Really? I'm not sure. I'm not like.
Okay.
I think you need a certain amount of gut to.
Lewis, do you want to explain what the Beijing bikini is?
Well, it's basically when they lift their top up and have it sort of resting over their belly. So they're basically airing their belly, but they don't actually take their top off. So they just kind of lift it up to the guys, not the girls, lift their top up and rest it over their large belly. It tends to be larger guys with a big belly do it. Like actually the kind of person who in the West I would think would be least likely to want to show off their, like I think in the West if someone's going to show their belly, be a guy with like some abs, like a six pack or something, like like so. But it's actually often the guys by Western standards with maybe the least appealing abdominal area to visually look at who would seem most likely to do this. But I don't think that's necessarily for the appearance. I think that is just a practical cooling down mechanism.
I mean, I think it's hilarious. I loved it when I first started seeing it in China, and it would usually be the bigger guys with a big gut, and they'd be smoking a cigarette. They'd be getting out of taxi. Taxi drivers like to get out of the taxi and do it, and just lift up the t-shirt right under their man boobs, and just let it all hang out. And they're proud as anything, very proud of it. And I asked a bit people about this. I said, what's the practicality or the science or the Chinese medicine behind it, whatever? And they said it's a way to expire, cool people down. I'm not sure if that all adds up to me. Trevor, do you think there's a scientific base to it?
I know it's been made illegal. It's so widespread in China that you get a fine if you walk down the street. How functional it is, I don't know. I used to mockingly do it sometimes in the presence of my wife.
Yeah. I want to do it. If we can start this in England, I'll be very happy. Just all the guys walking around with the bellies out and the t-shirts.
But you got to stroke it as well, because a lot of them will be stroking their belly like they're pregnant. They got this big belly, like stroking like it's pregnant. For a Westerner, when you first arrive to China, it's a very bizarre thing to see. Well, again, I'm sad to hear that it's been made illegal. I hope it doesn't completely disappear.
I hope it doesn't. I actually find it's not charming. I just think it's funny, to be honest. And again, going to these beauty standards for men and having a gut being fat, I think that was considered a successful beauty standard at some point. I think men are showing off their gut as a sign of wealth. Don't forget, that being large, having a belly, has been a sign of wealth throughout pretty much most societies historically. It's a very new thing where we're talking about, men have got to trim down and be health conscious in historical terms. You can find this in more, rural areas, maybe, shall we say, uneducated areas where kind of having a bit of fat around the rim is still a good sign. And that was the case in Thailand. And I think you can still see this with the kids, because the grandparents will overfeed these kids a lot, and they'll be quite happy that the kids are a bit chubby. They see it as a sign of health, maybe good health, but also affluence and success. Well, I don't know. What do you think, Lewis? Do you think that's right?
I think in China that it is interesting, particularly for guys, because it's sort of like seems to be a lot of different conflicting beauty standards going on. Like you say, certainly for like the sort of middle-aged men from more rural areas, a large gut and big size doesn't seem to be considered, unattractive. They're happy to literally show off their gut in public. But then I think there's also a large influence from like Korean soap operas, where there's like pressure on guys to look more like the women's beauty standard, where it's like sort of pale skin, very thin, no body hair, and I think it is common for people to have hair lasered off, and I'm sure it's more common for Chinese men to have their hair lasered off, their facial hair, if they've got some, than it is in the West. But then also there seems to be this sort of like Western influenced beauty standard where, some of them are in the gym, they're trying to bulk up, they're seeing Hollywood action movies with The Rock and stuff, and and then some of them are chasing after that. So I think for guys, it's not so clear what the beauty standard is.
Yeah, it's going through a transformative stage, definitely. I think as China is in a whole with many things. I think we need to mention our beards as well, because this is the other thing. Again, I think it's changed a little bit recently, but again, recruiting teachers over the past few years, we would get schools and people in HR turning applicants down if they had beards during interviews. Certainly, one of the first pieces of advice I ever had in Asia, and it's a piece of advice I still hold dear when I'm teaching. If I'm teaching in Asia now, a guy had taught in all around Asia for 20 years. He did my TEFL, and he said, my best advice: always be clean shaven and wear a collared shirt. And he said that'd be 50% of your job. That'll be 50% of your job if you do that.
Look at you now, John. Look at you now.
Look at me now. T-shirt and a
look how far he's fallen.
Yeah, but I mean, no. Look. If I actually go in, if I were to go into a classroom tomorrow in China, I would be clean shaven again, because I do actually think it works a lot. People argue that it can be distracting for kids. That if they've got a beard, they ask questions. Maybe it's the first time they've seen one, and they use that excuse. But generally, I think beards have always been, well, still are considered maybe a sign of peasantry, unkeptness, maybe that they don't trust facial features, because beards can hide certain facial features and expressions on your face. So maybe it's got like a trust element to it. But I mean, I remember, again, I did actually grow a beard my first year there. I went to the Philippines for a couple of weeks, didn't shave, came back, and a couple of the office staff saw me before I went back to the training center, and they were started laughing at me, and to a point where they were really laughing at me, saying how ridiculous I looked. I don't know, Lewis, you've had a beard quite a long time. Have you felt that it's been a hindrance to you?
But not really. I mean, I didn't really have much of a beard in China. The same thing. It's like you kind of like sometimes without even realizing it, you start to subscribe to the beauty standards that are applied to you, don't you? So I mean, I was pretty much clean shaven most of the time when I was in China. But like, I think that is this sort of, from what I'm aware of, there are two sort of racial stereotypes that, in terms of like appearance, that they kind of apply to to foreigners, and that is they're all hairy. Like Asians aren't hairy, foreigners are all hairy, and foreigners all sweat. They all smell and they're sweaty, and Asians don't sweat. And that's like the two kind of stereotypes. And I made a mistake once where I think when I was studying at Zhejiang University, I did some bit of part-time work on my student visa. Oops. It's all right, I'm out of the country now. They can't do anything. But go on, everybody's done it. A bit of teaching kids on the weekend part-time on your student visa. And I made the mistake of it being summer, so I'm wearing t-shirt and shorts. And I had kids like laughing at me because I've got hairy legs, and like literally like pull the hair on your legs. Like, is it real? Can't believe that's real. Like, I think, I do have slightly more body. I'm not a particularly hairy guy, but I do have probably slightly more than the average Chinese guy. But it does seem to be a beauty standard for men to not be hairy.
Yeah, I think it's a bit exotic and unusual, I think, for them. They're a bit wary of excessive hairiness, shall we say. Trevor, has anyone ever, with regards to comments about your features, have you ever took offense to it, or has it kind of crossed
called hairy? Maybe early on in my first year of 10 in China, I was somewhat, because there was often comparisons to monkeys, foreigners.
Yeah, it's true.
And we talked about, for some of it was with hair, being bearded and having hair on your limbs and whatnot. But also we talked in previous episodes about historically. I've had people in a big group of people saying that, comparing me, foreigners, Europeans, as monkeys, because at the time of when Chinese were reading and writing, foreigners were swinging on trees.
Yeah, I've heard that a few times.
I mean, I was just kind of taken offense by the deliberate, the intention of it all, and just kind of naively getting suckered in. But most of the time, I have to say, Chinese are overwhelmingly complimentary. Kind of like, Lewis, what you were talking about. It's just like saying hello, ni hao, oh, ni hao, shuai. Or, oh,
think you
you've got
can.
a tall nose. Oh, I wish I had your nose. Like,
Yeah.
I think similar to the
Oh,
compliment,
no.
where you can take them too seriously and let it get to your head. The same when they say something negative about your appearance, like they don't necessarily mean it in like a really offensive way, and they'll be surprised if you would take offense by
Yeah.
something, because like similar to the compliments, it's not it's sort of words that are coming out of the mouth, but they're not really, it's very perfunctory. It's not, they're not really thinking it as having real meaning that's going to affect your emotional state the same way that I would if I was talking to somebody in Britain.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I've only got one story where it wasn't the fact that it crossed over the line, but it became a big situation, inconvenience, and it was quite recently actually. It was only 18 months ago, and I was doing an assessment for a lot of rich Chinese parents get their kids. Some of them come because they own factories. A lot of them live outside of Hangzhou, maybe in smaller towns or cities where there's no international schools. So the very wealthy from these smaller towns and cities, they will try and send their kids to international schools within the big cities. So I had one girl that needed an assessment just to see if she had any English level and kind of what it would be like. And this wealthy family turned up in a brand new Mercedes, and there was actually two kids. One of the older kids was fine, and I think they were cousins. And then the second was a young girl. She was only 6 or 7. She was very young, and it was only a 15-minute assessment. But as soon as she walked in, her eyes just dilated with fear. She was just petrified of me, because it was the first time that she'd seen a foreigner, but she kept saying, and she was saying it in Chinese and even a little English to me as well, about my nose. Now I am blessed with a massive nose, far more than average, but it became that she was generally frightened of me, and I think that's the first time where I felt, oh, actually, this is.
But his nose, mommy. But his nose.
That's what she was saying. She was, mommy, and she was asking if it was real. She's like, just your gender, and I was like, yeah, you really haven't ever, been this close in this situation before, and I didn't make a fuss out of it, but it became abundantly clear that we couldn't carry on with the assessment. She was, she was in tears and she was very upset, and she was exposed to a situation that just made her very uncomfortable. So we kind of had to pull the plug on it. But I can honestly say it's the only time where I thought my life had been made difficult by these, these ingrained perceptions or just being exposed to something very, very different for them.
But I think also something else that's often overlooked in these situations is you've got a 6-year-old girl and she's just being thrown in front of a stranger and is like, talk to her in a foreign language.
Yeah.
And that's just a very intimidating situation anyway. I've had that where, in China, I'm sure most, foreigners or people who at least look foreign in China, I've had the situation where, some like a grandmother is like trying to get the 6-year-old grandchild to go over and say hello to you.
Oh yeah.
And the kid's like, I don't want to do it. And it's like, well, is it because I'm a scary foreigner, or is it because you're just telling him to go and talk to a complete stranger? I know if I said to my son, just go and talk to that stranger over there, he'd be like, no, that's like.
That's an everyday occurrence. You get in an elevator and there'd be a grandmother and there'd be a bit coy. It's usually the grandparents, and they'd be encouraging their grandchild to go and speak English or attempt to speak English to you. And you feel obliged, after a bit, if you're having a bad day, I sometimes put my headphones in and just, forget about it. But, 9 times out of 10, I would try and engage with them. But it's exhausting because it's not just one. Especially in the center of the city, if the kids are off school and the grandparents bring them out, you can end up going to the shop and having to stop and talk to, 3 or 4 kids with the grandparents. And
what shop are you going to, John? 3 or 4 ones?
Well, no, it's like down the elevators in Guoda. So because they all come in there in the summer because the air conditioning. That's it. Yeah. That's the other thing that the grandmothers like to do. They take the kids out and they spend time in the malls because the air conditioning's free, and and the
Save
kids, save money, and the kids are
yeah. I think we've kind of gone off topic, haven't we? Though.
Yeah, we have. I just wanted to say one more thing actually about the skin tone thing, is that it can get a little sinister for I think for kids and people involved, and obviously with the social class it can be very judgmental. But I've actually had at one of the schools, a girl was getting bullied because of her skin tone, and what they were saying that she has darker skin. She came from a very rich family, and then she refused to play outside, go outside at break time, because she thought the sun would make her skin darker. So she became, the idea of recreational play outside was a nightmare for her. So she would just cower away in the classroom. So I think there's a lot of kind of other factors that kind of get onto this, and it can be quite difficult for the kids. It is a bullying issue. Right. Anything to add to that, Lewis or Trevor?
Yeah, that definitely the influence on children is huge here when we're talking about these, especially because it's not just seeing it in the media and the advertising for whiter skin, and it's just because it's so commonplace to hear it be commented upon, especially by adults to children. Those of you who have friends or know people who have non-Chinese children, the differences, either they're maybe half or part Chinese, or maybe a full non-Chinese, ethnically non-Chinese child, the differences in appearance are constantly being commented upon, and the amount of tension, usually positive, towards toddlers and to small children becomes really high. And it's got to impact the children in their values and some of their how they see themselves within the community, especially as they start to understand more and more what it means to be different, I guess. Lewis, have you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about skin tone, but I mean, and then sort of physique and shape. But one thing we haven't talked about is hair color. And like my son, when he's 2 years old and in China, the number of people just pulling his hair or just touching his hair. And at one point, a guy probably not much older than me, or around my age, just actually took my child's hair and actually pulled it and tried to pull his head back so he could look at my son's face. And that almost ended quite badly. Yeah. I think as Trevor said, it's sort of constantly being commented on. I couldn't take my son out anywhere without somebody commenting on the fact that he doesn't look like the other Chinese kids, and not just parents and grandparents, but it seemed to be, for me, about the age of about 4. Any child over the age of 4 would make a comment about how he looks different. Not 2-year-olds just tend to accept everybody who they are without judging them. But I think today we've been talking a lot about the sort of the skin tone thing, but we've really been talking about it in terms of Chinese people being more tanned or less tanned, and there's a huge variation between the sort of skin tones of ethnically Han Chinese people. Mm-hmm. But I think that does sort of lead on to the topic of people who aren't ethnically Chinese, and how sort of skin tone sort of affects the way that they are treated in China as well. Not just other people who are not Han Chinese, but Uyghurs, for instance, but also expats from other countries.
Yeah. Well, do you want to get into that now? Should we leave that for next week?
I think, as I mentioned on the phone, I don't think that's a great topic for 3 white guys to be talking about. I think
we can talk about the education system and children, though. And
we know it's going to be sensitive. So I think we should think about how to, because look, there's a lot to be said about China, and we will have to get into the ethno-nationalism and the race and kind of how all this plays out, and how we can maybe even compare it or see just how opposite things are in the West. I think we need to dedicate some time to that and plan it out and maybe get some other people involved. If you don't mind, there's one last thing I want to talk about: beauty and standard, just a frivolous thing. Perfume. This is another thing. So we've talked about, like, girls are crazy about makeup. They love face masks. They I think on their pedestal they put South Korea girls. Like, Chinese girls aspire to be like South Korea girls. Maybe they have their own style these days. So makeup is a very big thing. Fashion is a very big thing. But aromas and perfumes are not a big thing for aftershave for men, even deodorant and perfume for girls. When I would use a deodorant in the gym, I'd often get some funny looks, or some guy would try and talk to me, and I'd try and he'd ask where I'd buy it from. Then in Chinese, I'd make a hash of trying to tell him what it is, because I think there's no word for deodorant, right, in Chinese. It's the same word for perfume, I think.
No, you could say stop sweating liquid, like
right. Okay.
But it's not really a word I've heard very much. And as you say, it can be notoriously difficult to buy in China.
Oh, yeah, it's expensive as well when you find it. But
there's a lot of times imported. It's not, it's on the imported aisle. It's not, sort of produced for the Chinese market.
I mean, it comes down to, they say it's like 70% of Chinese don't sweat, essentially. I'm not sure if it's that high, but it's to do with enzymes and to do with earwax as well. Like, if you have dry earwax or soft earwax, like, certain people don't sweat. And I did have many students that would tell me that they don't sweat. And one girl in particular, she'd go to the gym, she'd be on the running machine, and she was one of the students, and she'd come off and say, "Look, I'm not sweating. See, you don't believe me." And it's true. She wasn't sweating at all, which is quite. So I think that's why maybe the deodorants are limited of use. But perfumes generally, I never figured out why there's a mistrust with them. My wife won't use them, and my girlfriend before, she had a perfume to put on her makeup desk, but she never used it. And I think they were viewed with a bit of suspicion. Trevor, have you come across this?
Perfume, most people say just no need for it and don't enjoy even a good perfume. Couldn't tell you the difference between two types of perfume. It's just not a culture that most people in China really appreciate. But they do notice it. I'll wear cologne sometimes, and people will comment on it, but usually as that's culturally different.
Oh, well, this is what I was going to get.
Foreigners really do wear cologne and perfume.
Well, it's negative. I've had people get away from me, especially the older generation on the subway, that back away from me if I'm wearing aftershave, and I'm only wearing a little bit. But I think I'm not sure whether it's like they see it as offensive, or because it's so unusual that it's worried about, or whether it contradicts Chinese medicine.
Yeah, maybe it's like a chemicals thing. Maybe it's like, if I breathe that, I'm gonna get sick. Because they do that a lot, like particularly with when girls get pregnant, they can't wear any makeup because the chemicals, and the child's gonna, be adversely affected by it or something. So
yeah, well, we have to talk about
to whiten your skin.
we can, yeah, that's true. Yeah, think of all the chemicals in that skin whitener. We have to do a talk about pregnancy and the youths.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, that'd be a great one to talk about. But yeah, I mean, look, there are some big differences with beauty. I think it is changing. I think a lot of the beauty standards that the objectives that the Chinese still hold dear and that are placed in mainstream media, and all over East Asia, I don't think they would be accepted in the West at all. I think there would be, if we had this same kind of level, it would be, completely shouted down. But, I've seen changes. I've seen fashion change, and it changes very quickly. Like me and Lewis have said, a lot of guys seem to be going to the gym now to bulk up. People are interested in... I've seen guys starting to wear more shirts and suits as well. not a huge amount, but I've started to notice a bit more, because that's the other thing. Guys don't wear smart clothes in China, for businesses, and you go to the office, everyone's just wearing a hoodie or a t-shirt, sneakers and slacks, which
Not always, but it is more business casual.
Even when they're wearing a shirt, you don't really see a tie.
Oh no, yeah, rarely see a tie, and the people that wear a tie are usually working in hotels or bars. So yeah, I mean, I particularly like wearing suits because I think it's like it's kind of like a uniform, or like you're going into battle. Do you know what I mean? I like to put a bit of effort into it. I think it's respectful. It's respectful to the people that you're engaging with. But I've been into offices where I've been looking for the manager or expecting to see someone from a company, and I've just completely overlooked them because I thought they were just a student wearing a hoodie with some baggy shorts, and it turns out he's the manager. Which it took me a while getting used to. And I'm not sure whether that's a conscious effort to make themselves different from Japan in the business arena, because Japan are very formalized with clothing, or simply because a lot of their business is tech heavy, and with tech heavy companies, they tend to be more liberal with casual clothing and stuff. What do you think, Trevor?
Well, sometimes it's not always true. I think, and this is the case where there's a bit more diversity when you see business attire or what's acceptable. I've even been in meetings where men will wear more traditional Chinese clothing as kind of a symbol of status, as management or business owners. And then also people will wear Western clothing, definitely not a tie or a vest or anything, not quite as much as Jonathan Hoey, but
yeah, it's a bit OTT.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
Look at the picture.
Well, actually, the waistcoat is they're quite difficult to buy in China. I think I've only seen a couple of guys wear.
But you see a lot but John, don't you think you do see a lot of people, especially like CC or course consultants and salespeople, will wear a shirt and a jacket?
Yeah, but that's uniform. So this is the difference. It's not it's like if you give someone the choice in China, they will ultimately opt for casual. Like you do get like course consultants, but it's like following a script to like a branded blazer, a skirt, black skirt for women, a suit for men.
That's true. On the few occasions when I have seen Chinese people wearing a tie, it looks like they're wearing a sort of secondary school uniform.
Yeah.
Black trousers, black shoes, white shirt with their tie, not done up, like not quite the right length.
And they're usually sales jobs. They're usually just low-level sales jobs.
Or a hairdresser. Actually,
yeah,
hairdresser wearing a tie, but I think that's kind of more like a fashion thing, like they're wearing a tie in a fashionable way or something, like a skinny tie. But it's definitely not like an attempt to look smart and professional, but more kind of like, I don't know, like.
I mean, you said it too, but even if it's a t-shirt, a lot of the time you'll see very brand name t-shirts for men. It's not like fashion doesn't exist for men, and there's not business appropriate attire. You need to looking your best, I guess, if this is what you're saying, has a very different meaning, and it doesn't have the formality of a suit and tie or the equivalent or any.
Yeah, definitely the formality, but the fashion is kind of, it's brand orientated, especially for men, with things like sneakers and trainers. The sneakers culture in China is ridiculous at the minute for men. I mean, it's also in Europe and the US, but in China, it's pretty much blowing up at the minute. And again, you've got this hierarchy of status about what sneakers they wear. They wear them to work, keep them clean. They wear special bags over them. And this is going through to 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. It's not just, university students.
Other interesting. Have you ever noticed the male purse?
Yes, that's quite big. Yeah, the male purse.
You mean, when guys are like carrying their girlfriend's handbag? Is that what you mean?
No, this is different.
That happens too, but but I'm talking about men having their own Prada,
Yeah.
Gucci, Armani,
Man.
just luxury designer brand name
Yeah.
bags that they.
Very common with Wenjo guys. Wenjo guys like to carry those around with the gold, with the Gucci purse, big Gucci purse, gold chain, and the flashy shoes with tassels on them.
So we call them Merce.
But but Lewis, you were talking about which we do an episode on that about girlfriends, boyfriends. I think in the future about what a Chinese girlfriend would expect their boyfriend to. And one of those is carrying their handbag, and it's seen. I'm not sure why. I think maybe it's a sign of submission, or like this is my man, or they're marking their territory, or the man is doing them a favor. But they're tiny, tiny little purses. It's not like she can't carry it, or it's a big, heavy weight or burden to her. But he will carry it while she does her shopping.
But I think it's almost like the guy. Maybe it's like the guy showing off. He's like, "Yeah, look at me. I've got a girlfriend.
Yeah,
I'm carrying a bag, so she's my girl. That means I've got a girlfriend, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I've got.
She's not my sister. Like she's my girlfriend. I'm carrying a bag, right?
Yeah. It's very common though. You see it all the time in the shopping. And they don't seem bashful about it. Like it's definitely a pride thing. I've actually been originally when I started dating in China, I kind of refused to do it because I was like, I'm not holding your handbag. I don't care whether it is Gucci. But anyway, yeah. So like I say, there are big differences in the beauty standards. I think Korea certainly was the template that most of East Asia looked towards. I think China's veering off on its own now with its own, difference, with its own standards of fashion, plastic surgery, things like that. But I think
we didn't even really get into it that much.
We can.
There's so much I had to say on that.
Let's just do a quick little bit about plastic surgery. So I'm not
sure if I got time, John.
All right.
We'll talk about this.
We've finished off then because we've gone over an hour.
Yeah.
All right, boys. Right. So hopefully we get a bit of insight into the standards of Chinese beauty, and we'll be back next week probably with probably looking at ethno-nationalism next week if we can get some of the people involved.
Good to be back.
Anything else you want to add?
Ethno-nationalism in the education system.
Yeah, okay. We'll get into it next week. Okay, bye for now, everybody.